Hey, welcome friends. Come on in. Good to see everybody. Whatever place and time zone you're coming to us from, welcome. So we'll just give you a little bit of time to get settled in there. And oh, I see some familiar faces. What a great community we have. This global community of practitioners. Awesome.
I love the doorbell. It makes me feel like somebody's coming to my house.
It's very personal, isn't it?
It's very personal. I like it.
Yeah. Just like in Canada here, we can't just leave the door open, unfortunately, right? Because it's too cold. So the doorbell keeps going. And this is great. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, so all right, you guys are already getting onto the chat here. So thanks, Adam, for starting us off. If anyone else, or I welcome everyone to just introduce yourself on there, tell us where you're coming from. And we're going to spend a little bit of time in discussion as we go along too. So yeah, feel free to come out from hiding and let's see your face and tell us where you're from. Adam, I think I remember you from, I might have crossed over with you at Cody for my short stint there. Cool. Anyways, look at all these great people. So, so welcome aboard. And I'm not in my usual, I'm just on my little laptop screen here. So I'm trying to maneuver around all these different elements of text and slideshow, etc. So yeah, well, let me start. Welcome here. This is a bit of a panel of people that are going to be coming at you, and probably just as important as hearing from us, we want to hear feedback from you and have a chance to discuss what we're talking about and allow everyone to throw a log on the fire, so to speak. And in doing so, we'll get a good burn going. So let me introduce you to 5 and 2 Network. We're the group that is making this little contribution here, and we've kind of been leaning into this topic of monitoring and evaluation, I guess we'll call it for now. So we're a community of practitioners, I guess, a global community that involves both individuals and organizations from around the world. And so we offer training courses and some coaching and grants and other resources and things like that. But we really value having a flat structure where everybody in the network is contributing and participating in what we're doing, and feeling mutually empowered that way. And so we're going to hear from some guests today. Khotso is a good friend of mine from Lesotho, and he's been leaning hard into this area of evaluation through the lens of asset-based community-driven development, or sometimes we might call it CCD, community-centered development. And then Serge from Kinshasa will also be sharing. And so I'm going to give you a little bit more details on them later. And then finally, Daniella Fast, who works with me with 5 and 2 Network, is going to share some of her ideas, a bit of a tool, a bit of a path forward for integrating some of these issues of, how do we evaluate things that are in some ways are difficult to put a finger on. So some of us love this topic of evaluation. We love to crunch the numbers, and we're sort of hardwired to get to the bottom of things. And others, man, if you're like me, it's important to do somehow, but then when the topic comes up, your eyes kind of glaze over a little bit, you get a bit sleepy, or you get frustrated by it, because if you come from sort of a community-centered development mindset, you just feel like it doesn't fit. the way that we need it to. And, you know, to be honest, there's good reason that it's frustrating, because there's a bit of a suspect history with monitoring and evaluation, because historically it was kind of developed for the sake of the donors. And for the most part, the practices and the processes, the indicators, I guess, of monitoring and evaluation were designed by donor agencies or governments, maybe in order to justify funds that were being spent, or even just make sense of the projects. And so in that way, it became a bit problematic. And most problematic is the fact that the activities of data collection and the review process are often carried out by the donor agencies themselves. One essay I recently read on evaluation, this is a little quote here, Natalie Holvit says this: "We've adopted an overly technocratic approach to monitoring and evaluation that disregards the broader institutional and systemic issues." And she goes on to say, "The quality of a country's monitoring and evaluation efforts may differ sharply depending on one's perspective. Ultimately, the assessment process must pass through the lens of local people and their socio-political context." Let me read that last part again. Ultimately, the assessment process must pass through the lens of local people and their socio-political context. Okay, so that's easily said and not very easily done. And so that's kind of what we're going to move towards today. Tell you a little story. Early in my development career, when I was making a lot of mistakes, and I probably still am, but just trying to figure things out, we had funded a fish farm project, and the local leaders had assured us that the project was a great success. And after about a year, we returned to the community to evaluate the success. And I remember sitting down, before we even went out and looked at the project and the ponds, we had a banquet. And once we were seated, they brought out a beautiful fish, and we were able to eat the fish, and really show some pride in the fact that this project had been successful. But at the time, I didn't realize that it was the only fish remaining from the project. And so here we were expecting to evaluate the sustainability of the project, and they were excited to reveal what large and delicious fish they were able to grow. And so it turned out we had completely different ideas of what should be evaluated. So the story is a bit sad and a bit amusing, I guess. But when we think about evaluating our development projects, or the development projects that we're involved in, through the lens of social impact, we're asking the question, what are we actually evaluating? We're evaluating the taste of the fish, or the number of fish produced, or obviously there's something more complex and deeper going on. Could it be the health ramifications of growing these fish in the community, or even the effect on people's livelihoods, or sustainability, the ability of that community to leverage the project into something greater than the project itself? So today we want to reflect on these questions. Of course, number one, we want to consider the who question. How is the community taking ownership in the evaluation process? And then we want to look at the what question. What are we evaluating? So if our goal is self-empowered communities, what are the indicators and what are the outcomes that we might want to measure? So I want to quickly, I see the agendas come up here. So number 1 and 2 can check those off the list. And yeah, we're going to just hear from Serge and Khotso, have a time to break out and discuss what we've heard. And then Daniella is going to share this sliding scale tool for evaluation. I know she's eager to get feedback on that and hear from you. And then another breakout room in conclusion. Let me tell you quickly about Serge. Serge is a good friend and participant in our network. He's in the DR Congo. He's worked in education anti-poverty programs for a long time. He's founded this fellowship, Patrice Emery Lumumba, with friends of his, as well as the Center for Scientific Research and Expertise. He's very interested in data and computers since childhood, so he comes by this honestly. He's also a lawyer and social worker. He's got a lot of projects that he's working on now. He's an evaluation consultant in CISPONS and looking forward to applying ABCD to private school leadership and management in Kinshasa. And I know for a fact that he's very committed to applying CCD in everything he does, both in work and life. And so we'll ask Serge to go first, but let me introduce Khotso as well. And then Khotso, you can just tag on immediately after Serge is done. We'll hear from you, and each of them will share for about 10 minutes. And Daniella, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're gonna go back to back, and then we're gonna break up and discuss that. So Khotso is from Lesotho. He's a passionate, people-oriented person, the founding director of Lesotho Building Lesotho. His education includes an MA in adult education with a community development major. He's using his background in pastoral care and counseling. He actively works with communities, teaching CCD principles and tools while coaching them in various community building initiatives. He's passionate about agriculture, justice, and entrepreneurship. And all these things, by the way, he's seeing through a CCD lens. Recently, he's had the opportunity to share CCD wisdom and expertise with local media, government officials. And so he's got a mantle of leadership in that country now in the past couple of years that is well earned through his commitment to both research and practice. Community leaders trust his mentorship and guidance as they seek to create citizen-led communities. So Serge, let me welcome you to pick up the microphone and take over. I hope that introduction just kind of laid some groundwork for the discussion upcoming. And Serge, very grateful that you're here. And so take it away.
Thank you, Jimmy. I hope that everybody is hearing me okay. Yeah, thank you, Daniela. So thank you very, very much, Jamie, for the invitation. And I think I will not go back to everything that you said. You laid the path for this discussion, and I think that is it's great. And what I want to do right now is actually to tell a story, because as Jamie said, I worked in evaluation and monitoring for projects. So I think it's very funny the way I thought about it. You can see the smiley, right? I think the first one is how sometimes we get into the field for an evaluation project. Well, you know everything about the project. And actually it was a project for over $30 million. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure that sometime something great happened for my community. So I'm going there, right? But I had all my tools, everything set up. I had everything structured, and I knew a lot of things of which what the report was saying. I knew everything. So I was there, but it was quite weird what I saw, because when I asked the first question, because I had the CCD background, and I asked the first question and people said, clearly, we're not happy. Well, that is weird. After 5 years walking into a community, and even more before in another project, and then you arrive 5 years later, the project was closing, and you have the first word coming from youth and people from the community saying, we're not happy. So I think this is a place to just ask to ourselves the question, what happened for 5 years? Where was this, where was these people, where the project was implemented. And I asked, do you know the organization? They said, yes, we know it. Do you know in which domain they are working? They said, yes, we know. Do you know the activities? Did you receive at a certain moment in the project an invitation for these activities? They said, yes, we did. We was there, but we are not happy. So I was asking and wondering why they were not happy. And the project was closing, actually. It was kind of too late. And as a monitoring and evaluation specialist, sometimes we are frustrated, or researcher, we are frustrated because you see this. So if we can go to the next slide. And I was wondering, for all this time, I was meeting people and they say that they're not happy. So something happened and I needed to know where was the problem. So I kind of went deeper in that and I asked, well, what was the problem? Why do you have this feeling of not being happy? What should have we, what we should have been done better and how we should do that? And then I had the answer in front of me because the people from the community was there. So I had the people I could ask this question. I knew that they could give me the answers. And I was surprised because at the end of the project, after a long time where I could just say we wasted our time, I get. So on the why do you have this feeling? The next slide, please. On the why we have this feeling, the answer was very clear, and I got this answer for more than 5 to 6 focus groups with more than 10 people in each focus group. So in the next slide, we got the answers. And I think this is a very good way to start with the discussion about monitoring and evaluation when it comes to CCD. And what they asked, and that was a request, a direct one, because they knew that I'm a consultant, true. I'm not from the company that implemented the project, true. And they saw me as someone who will communicate what they feel to the company through my reports. And they took that as an opportunity. And they said, we wanted a chance to have a space of discussion with you before the project started. That was clear. And they said, well, if you thought that we have a need here, you should have gave us the chance to tell you what we feel about that need, to tell you how we can do with you so that you can reach even better results and greater impact. So if you have something to do in our community, please do it with us. Don't try to think, don't guess, don't assume, because we know exactly what is happening. And what we felt when this project started, it was that all the people from the project knew everything. So we just stepped back. That came from them directly. So the next slide about the what do you think that we can do, right? This word under Africa, it is to ignite, means you had to do just that, right? Tell us that you think that there is a need and that you think that there are opportunity, but also recognize that if there is a need, we are able to provide solutions. well, that's clear. If you think that we are able to give solutions to the needs that you've identified, and if we discussed about it, you will see that the solutions is within us, within the community. You can help us perhaps to discover new ways to do things, or to rediscover something that we were doing in the past and that worked. You can help us know that. But right now, you said that you are at the end of the project, and we feel that we did not participate enough. So I think Jamie is always saying this, who is it for? That is a very good question. Who is it for? But let us continue. So that they said something that we already have, an asset that we have, you had to maintain it. Like, don't try to tell us that we don't know anything. When you say that, the community take a step back. And that's what we hear when experts in project management and development coming into a community, when researchers are coming, they care about numbers, they care about baselines, but who cares about what we really feel? And then for the last question, they said, well, if a solution that we've discussed together, you find the same solution into our children's, that means you're able to reach your impact. Because if all finish with me, I've been into trainings, but the training will like die with me. I'm not able to give it to the people who will come after, to my children. That means I did not consider the solution as sustainable. So help us sustain what you're giving to us. Help us be able to own what you are helping us to understand, so that we are able to give it to the next generations. In another session that I've participated in another session, and someone was saying something very interesting. He was saying, well, it is a very important for us as facilitators in CCD to have in mind that we are giving something and then we go away. We should have that in mind. Sometimes we have to go away. So if we go away, how people own what you gave, the product of your project. If people own the product of your project, they are able to like have a kind of multiplication effect on all the generation that will come after. So they said the future generation should have the solution that you're trying to give to us. But right now, even us, we are not feeling that we own this solution. So to sustain, it is very important. You, when you come, to sustain is very important. But right now, you come as a consultant. What are these solutions? We know that you have them, but what are you going to tell to us? We don't know. We don't know. We can see things that have been done with the project, but we don't feel we own this. And well, some of them are even breaking. So what are we going to give to the next generation? Well, this was the revelation. And right now, I'm sharing this story with you so that we are able to kind of get into this discussion that is already, well, everything is starting for me as someone who is learning about CCD. And these are great questions that helped me enter in this. So these three words, to ignite, to maintain, sustain, should be the role of facilitators in CCD. And right now I'm kind of feeling that if a project design process doesn't take care of putting these three words in the way they build a project, there is no even way to implement it, because we will be in the position we are right now when we have a lot of projects that are being implemented, but nothing that is being filled as ownership in community. So I thank you very much. I think my time is up. And this is what I wanted to share. And I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Serge. Lots to think about there. And so I just encourage you to take down some notes as we go. And then we're going to move straight into Khotso here. And let me just tell you this discussion question now so you can have it in your head. If our goal is self-empowered communities, and I think we can all agree on that, and that's why we're here, what are the indicators or outcomes that we want to measure? If our goal is self-empowered communities, what are the indicators and outcomes that we want to measure? And you can think about that specifically or more generally or theoretically, but we just welcome your thoughts on that as we move into discussion after Khotso. And so it looks like Daniella's found this slide. So there you have Khotso. Khotso, welcome. Love to hear your stories and insights on this topic. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm okay, Daniella and everybody. And thank you so much for inviting me to this important meeting today. And like Serge has already done, I'm also going to tell the story. So I'm Khotso, like I said. A very small country. To quickly into the modeling kind issues today, I would like to let you know that I have a background in working with some of the NGOs in my country, but within the organizations that I've been working with, the focus was mostly on compliance to internal controls, which actually will translate into donors' terms.
Sorry, I think Khotso, your internet might be going in and out. Can you hear me still, Khotso? Try one more time, maybe.
Maybe his internet just went.
Yes, we'll give you maybe 30 more seconds, and then we can, I guess, move on and come back to you later. Khotso, can you hear me? It's the joys of power problems. Okay, I think we should go into our breakout room, Chase. So why don't we do that, and then hopefully we can figure out the issues with Khotso's internet and while you're in the breakout room. So I will just pose that question one more time for everybody, and you will automatically go into a breakout room in a minute. So the question again is, if our goal is self-empowered communities, if we're really saying that this is for the communities, then what indicators or outcomes might we want to measure? What are the things that we are measuring? So when you come back after having chatted with everybody, then maybe we'll get everybody to, as best as they can, type in their answers into the chat. All right, so let's go out into our breakout rooms. Are you all ready, Chase? Okay, so you should be able to join the breakout room right now. I think everybody's back now. So Khotso's internet got figured out, so he's gonna share now. And so maybe while he's sharing, you can write in the chat some of the ideas and treasures that you came up with during your chat time, and share some of those things that you are going to measure if we wanted to really seek for self-empowered communities. So please write that in the chat, and Khotso, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know where it cut off, but the most important part I was talking about was I had a background with working with the NGOs here, and I was part of the monitoring evaluation processes and activities. But what I learned during my tenure in these organizations, I learned that most of what we were doing was to work hard to comply with the internal controls of the organization. So, and it means the internal controls themselves were basically the objectives of the donors, you know. And therefore, monitoring and evaluation was therefore done to keep up with donors' expectations. And the focus was actually to please them. Like, this is what I picked as I was working with this international organization. Then I asked myself, where is the space for community members in the whole process of monitoring and evaluation? Like, for instance, where are they when we design the monitoring and evaluation tools? They are not there. And after monitoring and evaluation, how do we give that feedback? Do we go back to the community, or we straight give it to the donors? And I learned that most of the time we normally report to our donors, not to the same communities that we are working with. Well, one would argue that community members are included and they become participants during monitoring and evaluation. But I also argue that I think that they are just used as the unit in order to help the organization to complete their own programs, because the same community members never get feedback of evaluation reports. So the question is, then who do we do it for? So, like for the other experience I had is I ran one of the water system project in the community, and the community members were asking me to help them get the water in their community, because they once had a water system, but it seems like it's no longer functioning. And it has been 10 years without water in this community. Then 2 years down the line, I was able to fund the project, and according to the internal controls of the organization, I had to go through tendering process and all that until the project was complete. Then the second question I asked myself was, what would happen if this system is going to malfunction again? Are they going to get another donor? Then this is where I learned that it seems like there's something wrong that we are not doing in order to sustain our communities. Hence, when you would learn that when we do monitoring and evaluation, that it seems like we use these community members as just units, so that we can be able to complete our program. So and this is how it would also be. I was also expected to report, you know, and I'm going to make an example of the report that we're expected to write, and this is how it goes. It will go like, waterborne diseases has been reduced by 60% in this community X. And this has been achieved by our ministry interventions as we maintain and constructed maybe 5 water taps in the community. Now, 5,000 community members enjoy access to clean and potable water without going long distance to fetch the water. This used to be the best reporting line. And once you write a report like this in any organization, then you seem to be a good worker. But where is the space for, where are the community members at this time, when the organization is very happy about the report, sometimes very happy about the pictures that you send to your donors, and that now, if this system can no longer function again, are they going to wait another 10 years for a donor? And with this in mind, I concluded that the approaches that we did in our development activities were actually not empowering people, were not actually impacting on their life in a sustainable way. Therefore, our monitoring and evaluation will directly be administered without full participation of community members, because itself they were not fully engaged to help them whatever that is going to happen in their communities during the implementation processes. They are also not fully engaged in order to actually feel that they own the project. Therefore, it means there's going to be a poor transition when this organization is going to get out of the community, because people were never engaged from the beginning. This is why, in my context, most of the projects that have been done, when the project phases out, community members go back to their poverty. So then the question will always be, who do we do this development for? Then it comes again to monitoring and evaluation. Who do we do it for? So, like I said, I'm not an expert in this actually, but practically, these are some of the things that I learned, and I was part of the evaluation and monitoring activities. And sometimes it was amazing to find that even me as a practitioner on the field working with the communities, I was not even part of the monitoring and evaluation process. There will be an expatriate from another country to come into my country and do monitoring and evaluation for my people, and you'd wonder how this person will be able to do it while he cannot be able to understand the language, to understand the culture and all that. Therefore, it is a challenge when it comes to asset-based community development, because it requires us to engage with community members. Therefore, as community development practitioners in the whole world, I think there should be a shift in how we do a monitoring and evaluation, and it should be owned by the community members. That's how I feel, because they are the one who need the feedback on how they are progressing with their own development, not an organization, not a donor, but communities, because we normally say community development outcomes are best achieved when they are done by the community members themselves. Thank you so much. Hello.
Okay, sorry. Thank you,
Yes.
Khotso, for that wonderful contribution and those stories and really rich experiences that you've had. And so, you know, it's as we sort through all of this material and ideas, you know, I really feel like we're sort of turning up the earth here, and sometimes it's a messy job, isn't it? I really appreciate these resources that are being shared here. So we're gathering this stuff, and Daniella is going to share in a second here, and really it's just another kind of contribution to these kind of ideas. And I noticed even a little bit of maybe frustration in the chat about this question: what indicators or outcomes do we want to measure? I know a lot of you are probably in the same place as me, asking the question, are you asking us to measure something that's unmeasurable? Like, what's the point about talking about indicators and outcomes if you cannot quantify, if we're trying to quantify something that is so qualitative in nature? And so really, that's what we're trying to harness. That's what Daniella is trying to get at with this tool that she's about to share. The questions that are coming up are, who owns this community venture? Who's in control? Is this building community capacity? Is this creating functionality in the community? And to use Serge's term, has it ignited vision? Well, how do you measure those things? I think the important thing is to recognize that's what we need to measure. And I think we're all there. And so now we need to not give up on the evaluation measurement idea, but figure out ways to do it. Figure out more ways to do it. I should say it has been being done, and people have various ways of doing it. And so we need to talk about them, share information, and add to it. So I'm gonna invite Daniella to share. She's a good friend and colleague of mine. She's been working with me for the past 4 or 5 years. And we have traveled and worked on lots of stuff together. And her kind of background is in curriculum development and education. And so she's made a great contribution here as well in lots of different ways. So Daniella, I'll let you take it away. I don't want to squeeze into your time too far. And we also want to have some more discussion time as well. So go ahead, Daniella.
Thank you, everybody. And yes, I'm looking forward to seeing this community of practice that looks like being developed here. And I just hope to add a little bit of a nugget into this conversation with the things that I've been reading and researching and working towards. If we really believe in a strength-based approach to community development, then we also need to evaluate our efforts using some sort of a strengths-based tool. Serge, Khotso, and Jamie, they talked to this point where evaluation has really been done to please donors, right? And that's who they've been made for. And most of the evaluation that's been done has a great emphasis on the quantitative, but how do we measure the things that are the heart and soul of a community? And how do we evaluate for the good of a community rather than for the donors? So I was thinking back to my years as a secondary school teacher. And so that was my previous career here in Canada. And we were measuring, and we were trying to take a more strength-based approach actually to assessment. And we started to use something called a sliding scale to measure the growth and learning of our students based on what they could do. So fast forward to working now with our network, 5 and 2 network, we wanted to come up with something that was also strength-based and for our community. And I realized, wait, I know something that might fit this ABCD way of thinking. So we started to think about ideas for design. And remember, whenever we design something, the first thing we have to consider is the purpose for the design. So my husband, he's an architect, and he always loves to say that form follows function. A building has to be designed into a form that follows a deep understanding of the function of that building, whether it's like a community center or a swimming pool. Like, what is the true function of that community center, of that pool? And if that's the case, the form has to follow that. And so in the same way, we have to create tools or evaluations that ask ourselves that same question. What is the function or the purpose of this tool? So we decided that there were about 3 main things that we wanted to envision in this tool and to think of as our purpose for making this tool. So next slide, please. The first one would be that we would want to place honor in efforts which cultivate a functional and self-empowered community. That would be number 1. Secondly, we want to have something that calls on community members to be courageous and honestly evaluate where they are as a community and where they want to be going. And lastly, we want to validate and give credibility to transformation, social change, something that seems to feel and be intangible. So those were the main purposes of our tool. And so we needed to think of what the form could look like that follows that purpose and that function. So we started to think about what that could look like. And, you know, Jamie was talking about the concerns of evaluation being so concrete and being so rigid. So we wanted to develop a framework that was structured enough to help work towards a healthy, productive, and worthwhile goal, but also agile enough and flexible enough to fit various contexts and to have the ability to be actually customized and adapted by the communities themselves. Maybe they change the words on it. Maybe that makes more sense to their culture. They choose goals that are meaningful to them. And when I was in my ABCD course, and I think Jess is on this call, she was one of the instructors there, we talked about this word chaotic. And I really believe that in order for, and it stuck to me, that word has stuck with me for a long time, And I really believe that in order for an evaluation tool to fit a variety of contexts, but also to provide some structure and accountability, it has to be a mixture of both chaos and order. And isn't that what ABCD is all about? Community members then in this framework could select values through a continuum of metrics rather than have rigid fixed values of what they're trying to accomplish. Because this reflects that there's this reality that communities are on a journey. So you can see that little sliding scale there as an example there, that there's no I mean, I guess you see the lines and that looks like fixed values, but it's better to think of it more as that ombre that's happening there in the sliding scale, this movement of growth to reflect a journey, because progress occurs more on a continuum as opposed to on particular data points. So then we started to ask ourselves, okay, so if we're going to make a tool something like this, when would we use it? And actually, Serge's words really work well in this, because before we need to get into the details of this tool, we have to talk about the timings. And he talked about this word ignite. And to me, that's a way better word than a baseline, right? But there has to be a time in an evaluation process where a community reflects on their current condition, where they can set goals for themselves and start with an end in mind. And so with this tool, we wanted it to be something that could be used multiple times in the progress of a community or over a period of time. So the first one would be at the beginning. Then we have this maintain word that Serge said. And to me, this is like the formation period. And a lot of times we like to use in traditional evaluation the term monitoring. And in my mind, monitoring is a bit of an old-fashioned term because it kind of has an outside-in perception of somebody looking in and watching. Rather than, I prefer using the word that we use in education here in BC, we call it formative assessment. And the reason we use that word is because it's actually an ongoing formation that's happening. And so as we go along our journey, we can celebrate progress. We can have some reality checks along the way. We can shift, we can flex, we can create something new in these different points of progress. And then, of course, there's the end. We want to have every good goal has some sort of a time period. And so this is, I like the word sustain that Serge used, because this is like, okay, here's a summary of what we've done, what we've learned along this whole journey, and here's where we are. And hopefully that's a point of sustainment. And, you know, I think Serge talked about stuff like this happens over years of time. And we can't expect transformation like this to occur in 3 months or 6 months even. And so it depends on the community's pace in their trajectory and not the donor's pace. So we're asking for actually a greater purpose out of evaluation than traditionally has ever been done before. We're asking for a more formative process with an end in mind, and really should be part of the community's development cycle. Evaluation, it doesn't have to be just at the end. It can be integrated into the entire learning process. And how cool is that? So with the tool that we've been working on, and it's still not done, we're still in design phase, we've been talking about what the key components are. So maybe you can go to the diagram really quick to get the idea of what it is. So this is just a picture of the tool, and there's 4 key components that I'm going to talk about on this tool. The first one is more of the big picture, which is that this is a self-evaluation tool for the communities. So if we are truly doing this for the communities with an ABCD lens, then they need to own the process from the beginning all the way to the end. So if you look at number 2, that component is the continuum. This is basically the measures that we're going to be measuring, and the sliding scale goes along these 4 measurement points. This sliding scale is used to celebrate flag posts along their journey, and and towards their own development goals. And it just shows the growth along a path. And I'm going to go get into each one of these a little bit more in a minute. The third component is what we are actually measuring. And you talked about this a little bit in the chat there. This is the part where we are measuring, and what we like to talk about in our network is capacity and functionality. And I know in the opening plenary, John McKnight talked about those 7 functions, and that's what we're talking about here. How do we measure the capacity and the functionality of a community? Those are the things that we want to be growing in. And those are our goals. So that's the third section. And then the fourth section is the evidence. So if we say that along that scale, we're somewhere between, you can see on my chart here, between emerging and developing there, what does that even mean? What is the evidence? And there's a saying, the proof is in the pudding, right? You've heard that saying before. The proof is in the experience. It doesn't matter if you look at the pudding and it looks nice and it's shiny and it's well formed. What really matters is when you taste it, the experience of it all. And so this is the quantitative and qualitative evidence that we want to mix and merge together to give evidence towards our evaluation. So I'm going to get into the very first component to start, which is the self-evaluation part. This is the big picture component, and it reflects the process as a whole. It could be done under the facilitation of a community guide, but the main thing is that the community must have ownership over this process from beginning to end. Because when communities assess themselves, then they are the active participants in their own evaluation. And they can honestly assess their strengths and have an authentic picture of who this is truly for. And this is a crucial aspect of the process. The second part is the proficiency continuum. And this is the actual sliding scale framework that gives some values. It's a progression of learning and transformation, and it reflects the way that we personally as an ABCD network value. Communities are on this journey. And so there are 4 words that we have here. And of course, these words can be changed, but it's more the idea of them all that I wanted to present here. The first is the emerging one. You can imagine like a seed and just a little bit of something coming out. This is the beginning of acquiring something. This is the initial understandings, the initial learnings of and processes of ABCD as it relates to the various measures. So this is just the start of something. Secondly is the developing word. So developing, now you've started to understand the goal that you're wanting to accomplish. You're starting to understand what strategies and processes, you're doing some things to get going on it. You're developing, basically, it's a good word to use. But you still at the same time are heavily being guided through this ABCD mindset and process. And slowly as we move along this journey, we get to something called proficient. And the word proficient just means that we have understanding, that we're skilled at something and have proficiency in a particular thing, like a particular goal, a particular strategy, or a particular process. And then the last word is the extending word. And this is the idea of sustainability. This is the idea that we have sophisticated understanding about something, we have sophisticated strategies and process, and this is really, it's become a way of being in our community. And so when using this with the community, these words might not be meaningful in various contexts, but that's the part that's special, is that you can change it. That's what we want in a tool like this. Maybe use different words, maybe use different pictures to show the meaning of growth. And as a community facilitator, maybe you give a picture of what that could look like as a community. And I wanted to give a quick, and I'll do this really quick, but I wanted to give you an example of this sliding scale in the education context, just to give you a little bit of an understanding how it's used. So I wanted to use it in my son's writing skills. So as an emerging writer, he would be able to, he's great in grade 4, maybe he would be able to write a brief story with one character and a little bit of a setting that he talks about. He knows kind of what the elements of a story are, and he's maybe shown a little bit of a problem. that would be emerging for an emerging writer at his age. Okay, moving along, developing. So maybe at this point he has loosely connected ideas. He can go through the storytelling process. There's a conflict, there's like rising action, and there's a climax, and maybe he has more characters involved in the story. Then we go to proficient. Well, here he's able to, his writing presents very relevant, easy to follow ideas. There's details, there's explanations. He has good control of his written language. He's presented a hero and a villain, and he's proficiently developing those characters throughout a storyline. Okay, and then extending would be now he's going like above and beyond. His writing is clear, it's focused, it's developed. He's elaborating, he's owning this process with new ideas. He's maybe even surprising readers because he's making twists and turns and created some wonder. He shows a deep understanding about how to write a compelling story. Now imagine you used a continuum like that, except for your goals were more community oriented. And you think about like social indicators and social or functionality and what that could look like along a continuum. Okay, so I'm going to introduce then the third component, which is those things that we actually are measuring. What are we moving along that journey of from emerging to extending? And these are the measures of capacity and functionality. So this is the big question. Transformation indicators are strength-based by focusing on what communities can do. They're broad in nature, so they can be tailored by the communities themselves. This is the part that the community really has to take ownership over, is the setting goals by the community and not having too many goals where it feels overwhelming. So what we're measuring is transformation, and there's two parts to it. There's this capacity part, which is more the intangible social part to what we're trying to measure, the part that feels unmeasurable. And then there's the functionality part, which is maybe a little bit more tangible and practical measures that are easier to show outcomes. The first being a little bit more abstract, and the second being maybe a little bit more concrete. So as an organization, when we were looking at the community capacity indicators, we asked ourselves, we did lots of research, lots of conversation with people in our network, experiences from our global community, and we tried to boil down the elements of the capacity or the self-empowered community down to 8 things. And some of you may have heard us speak about our 8 principles before, but those are the things that we feel like are the key indicators to show that a community has empowerment. And I'm not going to read them out to everybody because we're running a little bit short on time, but we're happy to send this all to you whenever you'd like. Just if you want to email me, I can put your just put your email, or actually, Kendra, can you put my email in the chat, and then I can send these out to everybody. But these 8 principles, positive principle, wholeness, ownership, organic, just being like the blueprint of a community, wonder and curiosity, momentum, the act of moving forward, relational, the strong linkages, the social capital of a community, and then the transformation, just a new paradigm of thinking. So imagine you went through these 8 principles and you started to ask yourself some questions within there. What does it look like to have wholeness? What does it look like to have ownership? And we sat down and we wrote a list of questions for each one of these, where a community, just as examples of that communities could ask themselves those questions about whether or not they feel they have that capacity. And so on that left side of the tool, a community could take one of these principles and say, hey, we really want to develop the wonder principle. And within that principle, this is the goal that we're going to set for our community. And then as a community, first say to ourselves, okay, so where are we right now? And where are we wanting to go within this goal that we have set for ourselves. And so then along the way, between the beginning, the middle, and then the end, we're asking ourselves, that's our key goal that we're wanting to accomplish as a community. This is the stuff that these are the factors of inner development. This is the elements that display like a paradigm shift from destitution and lack to abundance and possibilities. So instead of measuring outcomes, we're more interested in measuring these community capacity, things like strengths, inclusion, ownership, citizenship. And for the sake of time, I can't get into the details of all of these. So I will be happy to send this to everyone because I'm getting my time thing here. But I still have a few more things I really need to talk about. So we'll quickly do that. The last one is, or the second part of that is the functionality. So these are the community functions that Cormac Russell loves to talk about. And these are the more concrete goals that we can actually create as a community. Maybe we want to think more about shaping our local economies and make goals for how we're going to do that. And so we've set these goals. And then along the way, we assess ourselves, we give ourselves goals to what we want to set ourselves towards. And then the last component in this tool is this component of quantitative and qualitative assessment. So we have to prove where we're moving along this. And this is what gives validation to some of these unmeasurable outcomes. So if I could just get the picture of the tool, please. Yeah. So as you can see here, I'm just going to go through this example of wonder. So that's one of the principles that we have. And we asked ourselves a few questions in this capacity of curiosity and wonder. And let's say we say to ourselves, hey, as a community, we want to cultivate curiosity by creating space for people to imagine possibilities through a variety of strategies and exercises. And then we say, maybe right now as a community to start, we're between emerging and developing. And this is why we have started some things. We've gone into our classes and we've talked to our students about what they might want to be when they grow up. Maybe they've had a few different community conversations where they've made a list of the things they want to do as a community in the future. And then they write down all of those things as their baseline. Then they start to think about, and this is where the magic of ABCD comes in. We start to think about what kind of tools could we do as a community to start elaborating and cultivating this sense of curiosity and wonder. What if we had some community conversations where we did some visioning strategies, or we did some sort of strengths, taking our strengths and converting them into opportunities. And so we come up with different ideas for how we could cultivate this. And then we do some of those things. And a few months later, we come back and we say, hey, look at where we've grown in this particular capacity, in this particular goal that we set ourselves. And we start to record and mix and merge some of the quantitative and qualitative outcomes that we've seen over the way. And we can say to ourselves, you know what? I think we can move that sliding scale a little bit over as a community. And this is why. And that's what that middle section is for, is that this is why. And as the community continues to go along in various formation points, they can celebrate these points of progress. They can start to say to themselves, I think we need to improve this. We could maybe shift this, adapt that. And then again, the next period, we look and we can maybe move that little yellow sliding scale over again. And then at the end, it comes to the summative assessment. And this is where an evaluation of a community's progress happens at the end of a decided period of time. And this is the evaluation time where we are summarizing. And I saw in the chat people talking about how important stories are, how important just talking about having focus groups and all those different qualitative things. When we put that in here and we start to see over time the change of the sliding scale, we're actually putting quantitative measures onto a qualitative thing. And so that's really the goal of it all. So much though of the effectiveness of this tool is really dependent on how it's introduced and how it's implemented to a community. and its value will only be based on the level of honesty and authenticity. So it's really the art of the facilitator who can bring a community through this process where they design their own goals, where they take time regularly to form themselves by looking back at what they're trying to accomplish and measure themselves along the way, and then come to an end point where they can say, look at what we did as a community and how we've grown. And this is where we're at. And we can take these stories and we can take these measures over all this time and we can present them to our donors and to other people. So I definitely went over time and I had to rush there a little bit. I'm really sorry about that. But we do want to take some time to go into a breakout room to discuss a little bit about, you know, I know this tool, it might not be useful in your particular context, but what kind of things about this tool did you like? What could be improved? And how could some of the aspects or components of this tool be used in your own context? So I'd like to take a moment to let you chat about that in your groups and come back and share maybe one thing that you came up with as a group.
Okay, hi, welcome back. Hopefully you had enough time for discussion and you were not cursing the facilitators for giving too short of a time period, as is often the case. But we are a bit tight here and we're hoping for some more time to discuss as a group. You know, there's a lot to be talked about. And what I'm thinking is, let's, first of all, if you would like to just add your thoughts as text for now, that would be really helpful, just so we can get a general idea. What are some of the ideas out there? What are some of the suggestions and thoughts that are going on? For some of you, that will not satisfy your need to say more at this point, and because there is more to be said, and we want to hear more. And so I just want to invite you in terms of discussion now to focus on like a further forum for discussion about this. I read a couple ideas that came up in the chat, and perhaps some of you are already finding time to associate together and talk about this subject, and maybe you want to invite more of us into those discussions as well. So let's just talk about ways that we can overlap and think more into this collectively. So go ahead and share on that if you'd like. Oh, Daniella says Ritu had to leave because I know Ritu had a...
Oh, she's back though. She's back.
Ritu, what was your suggestion about sharing together on this subject in the future in some sort of capacity?
I thought Lamia was taking notes. I mean, see, what I would, I have a deep appreciation, first of all, because I have been facilitating self-assessments emerging from the dream of the community. So each community, if we work in 90 communities, each community has their own self-assessment, because especially in India, context is very important. So I cannot make any remark on this, but appreciate what you're doing. And I think we need more conversation. But what I've learned from my work is the importance of context, very, very important. And the language, because people really need to own it. Because what happens in M&E, is that we tend to use language and the community does not relate to that kind of language. Yeah. So they use very simple. So I have facilitated this with patients of, like, I come from public health, with diabetes, hypertension, and with indigenous communities, but they've really taken ownership. So simple language, it doesn't matter whether they're using that kind of, so these are two learnings from my experience, but I would love to learn more about what you're doing, and use a huge applause.
I would love to be part of your community of practice on that. So I see that that you put your email there. So I guess if anybody's interested in maybe sharing in this community of practice together, we can do that on the platform that Ritu was hoping to plan.
Okay, so before we run out of time here, because the countdown's on, yeah, please add your email, or Daniella's is there, so you can contact us at 512 Network, and we can coordinate that. Anyone that wants to be further involved in the discussion. So at this time, a big thank you to both Serge and Khotso for sharing your experiences, and also, of course, being involved in this process with Daniella and many others in our network. From around the globe that have been involved in that, particularly in those principles as well. Those are not principles we came up with, 512 Network, but a compilation of perspectives and knowledge and ideas from around the world. So thanks for that. And thank you to all of you, many of who I know in this community. It's wonderful to be in a work that has fellowship like this, and in community, and sharing goals together. So we appreciate that. So yeah, with that, we'll say goodbye, and hopefully we'll see you in some upcoming sessions. Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you very
everybody.
much. Bye
All the
bye.
best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
I think you can stop the recording.